The blade pressed cold against Cordelia's throat as she knelt beside the overturned wagon, her pale hands trembling against the dusty earth. Above her, the Apache warrior's bronze face remained stone-carved in the dying light of 1847, his obsidian eyes searching hers for something she couldn't name. "Please don't harm me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames consuming what remained of the supply wagon. "I'll bear you strong children." The words tumbled from her lips before reason could stop them, a desperate gambit born of stories whispered around campfires, of white women taken by tribes who became wives rather than corpses. She had nothing left to bargain with. The Apache raid had claimed her father, their guide, and every soul in their small trading party except her, Kiowa, for that was the name his enemies had given him, though his true name was Sacred Lord. His knife slowly, studying this strange pale woman who spoke of bearing children as casually as trading horses. Her auburn hair caught the firelight like burnished copper, and her green eyes held not the mindless terror he expected, but something sharper. Calculation, survival instinct, and beneath it all, a fierce will to live. "You speak of children with a man you have never seen before this moment," he said in perfect English, surprising her. His voice carried the cadence of two worlds, the rhythmic poetry of his people and the clipped precision of mission schools. "Why should I believe such words from one whose people shoot my children for sport?" Cordelia lifted her chin, meeting his gaze despite the knife still poised mere inches from her flesh. "Because I am not my people, and you are not yours, or you would have already taken my scalp." She gestured toward the burning wagon with one trembling hand. "My father traded fairly with the Comanche, the Kiowa, even some Apache bands. He taught me that survival sometimes means choosing unexpected alliances." The warrior's eyes narrowed. Around them, his war party moved like shadows, stripping the wagon of anything useful while their horses stamped impatiently in the growing darkness. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and smoke, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote's cry echoed across the vast New Mexico territory. "Your father is dead," Kiowa stated flatly. "His fair trading means nothing now." "No," Cordelia agreed, her voice growing steadier. "But I am alive, and I have skills your people might value. I can read, write, tend wounds, birth children safely. I've seen too many women die in childbirth because they lacked proper knowledge." She paused, watching recognition flicker in his dark eyes. "Among my father's trading goods were medical supplies. I know how to use them." Kiowa sheathed his knife with fluid grace, but his hand remained close to its hilt. The gesture sent a ripple of surprise through his waiting warriors. "You would trade your body for your life?" "I would trade my knowledge and my future for the chance to build something better than this endless cycle of killing," she replied. "Your people are dying from the white man's diseases. Mine are dying from your arrows. Perhaps there's another way." The Apache warrior studied her for a long moment, seeing something in this strange white woman that reminded him of his own sister, dead now 3 winters from smallpox brought by traders. The same fierce intelligence, the same refusal to accept defeat even when surrounded by death. "Rise," he commanded. Cordelia stood on unsteady legs, her traveling dress torn and stained with dust and blood, not her own, but that of the men who had tried to protect her. The Apache warrior called Kiowa circled her slowly, his moccasined feet silent on the hard-packed earth, evaluating her as he might a horse offered in trade. "You say you know medicine," he said, stopping before her. "Prove it." Without waiting for her response, he whistled sharply. One of his warriors approached, limping heavily, a crude bandage wrapped around his thigh where a trader's bullet had found its mark. The wound had been bleeding for hours, and infection already darkened the edges where the cloth had stuck to torn flesh. Cordelia knelt beside the injured man, her mind shifting into the practical focus her father had drilled into. her during their years on the trading routes. She had assisted him in treating everything from snake bites to arrow wounds, learning that survival often depended on steady hands and clear thinking rather than prayer and hope. "I need clean water, whiskey if you have it, and a fire to heat." "My instruments," she said, already reaching into the leather medical bag that had somehow survived the wagon's destruction. Her fingers found the familiar shapes of forceps, needle, and thread. Kiowa translated her words to his men, and within minutes she had what she needed. As she worked, carefully cleaning the wound and probing for bullet fragments, she became aware of the absolute silence that had fallen over the war party. Every warrior watched her with intense curiosity, some with suspicion, but none with the casual dismissal she had expected. "You have done this before," Kiowa observed, crouching beside her as she extracted the flattened lead ball with steady precision. "Many times," Cordelia replied, not looking up from her work. "The frontier is dangerous for everyone. Bullet wounds, knife cuts, fever, snake bite, I've seen it all." She began stitching the cleaned wound with quick, efficient movements. "Among my people, women learn to be useful or they die young." The wounded warrior, a young man with intelligent eyes and 3 eagle feathers in his black hair, spoke rapidly to Kiowa in their native tongue. His voice carried surprise and something that might have been gratitude. "Natchton says the white medicine woman has hands blessed by the spirits," Kiowa translated. "The pain is already less than it has been since the bullet struck him." Cordelia tied off the final stitch and applied clean bandages from her dwindling supplies. "Tell Natchton that spirits may bless, but knowledge and practice do the actual healing. The wound will mend cleanly if he keeps it dry and changes the dressing daily." As she packed away her instruments, Kiowa made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. "You will come with us to our winter camp," he announced. "You will tend our sick and injured. If you prove your worth, you may live among us." "And if I don't prove my worth?" The warrior's smile held no warmth. "Then you will die anyway, but you will have had more sunrises than you would have had lying beside this burning wagon." Cordelia nodded, accepting the harsh logic of survival. "What about the other matter? Your children?" "First, you prove you can keep our existing children alive through the winter sickness," Kiowa said, swinging onto his horse with practiced ease. "Then we discuss creating new ones." One of the warriors brought her a horsa, sturdy mare with kind eyes that had likely belonged to a Mexican rancher before today's raid. As Cordelia mounted, her torn skirts immodestly revealing her legs, she caught several appreciative glances from the younger warriors. Kiowa noticed too, and barked a sharp command that sent the men turning away. "You are under my protection now," he told her. "That means you are untouchable until I decide otherwise." As they rode into the star-scattered darkness of the New Mexico desert, Cordelia realized she was no longer simply trying to survive, she was beginning to live an entirely different life, one that would test every assumption she had ever held about her own people and the Apache who had just claimed her. Behind them, the wagon continued burning, consuming her old life in hungry flames. The Apache winter camp nestled in a protected canyon where red sandstone walls blocked the harsh desert winds and a spring provided fresh water year-round. Cordelia had ridden for 3 days to reach this hidden sanctuary, her body aching from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, but her mind sharp with fascination at the world unfolding around her. The camp buzzed with activity, despite the late hour of their arrival. Word of the white medicine woman had traveled ahead through the intricate network of Apache runners, and curious faces peered from the entrances of Wickiup's dome-shaped dwellings of bent poles and brush that seemed to grow organically from the canyon floor. "Usen has brought us a gift wrapped in enemy skin," declared an elderly woman who stepped forward to meet them. Her face bore the deep lines of 7 decades in the desert, but her eyes blazed with undimmed intelligence. She spoke in accented English, her gaze fixed on Cordelia with unsettling intensity. "This is Nalnish," Kiowa explained as he helped Cordelia dismount. "She is our medicine woman, keeper of the old healing ways. You will work under her guidance." "White woman." Cordelia bowed respectfully to the older woman, recognizing a test when she saw one. "I am honored to learn from one so wise. My name is Cordelia Brightwater." Nalnish circled her slowly, much as Kiowa had done at the wagon site. But her examination was different. She seemed to be looking through Cordelia's skin to something deeper beneath. "Brightwater," she repeated, tasting the English syllables. "In our tongue we would call you Talichi Red Water. Blood and life flow together, and both are needed for healing." "I understand," Cordelia replied, though she wasn't entirely. "Sure she did. Do you?" Nalnish's weathered hand suddenly gripped Cordelia's wrist, fingers pressing against her pulse point. "Your heart beats fast, like a rabbit fleeing the hawk. But your hands are steady. Good. We will need both qualities in the days ahead." "Do you?" Nalnish's weathered hand suddenly gripped Cordelia's wrist, fingers pressing against her pulse point. "Your heart beats fast, like a rabbit fleeing the hawk. But your hands are steady. Good. We will need both qualities in the days ahead." The old medicine woman led them through the camp toward a large wickiup set apart from the others. As they walked, Cordelia became aware of the sounds of illness coughing, labored breathing, the fretful cries of sick children. The invisible killer that had been stalking Apache bands across the territory had reached this hidden sanctuary as well. Inside the medical wickiup, oil lamps flickered over a scene that made Cordelia's heart clench. Nearly 24 people lay on woven mats, ranging from infants to elderly warriors. The unmistakable symptoms of smallpox ravaged their bodies: fever, the terrible pustular rash, delirium. Some were clearly dying. "This is why you are here," Nalnish said quietly. "Our healing songs and sacred plants cannot fight this white man's disease. Perhaps white man's medicine can." Cordelia knelt beside a young boy whose labored breathing suggested his lungs were filling with fluid. His mother, a woman perhaps her own age, looked up with desperate hope in her dark eyes. In that moment, Cordelia understood that she was no longer simply bargaining for her own life. She held the lives of an entire community in her hands. "I need to examine everyone systematically," she said, opening her medical bag. "Some of these people are too far advanced for any treatment to help, but others ... double quotes, she lifted the boy gently, listening to his chest. "Others might be saved with proper care." For the next 6 hours, Cordelia worked beside Nalnish, learning to bridge two entirely different approaches to healing. The Apache medicine woman's knowledge of local plants and traditional remedies proved invaluable, while Cordelia's understanding of disease progression and sterile technique offered new hope for the most critically ill. "You do not heal like the missionaries," Nalnish observed as dawn light began filtering through the wickiup smoke hole. "They speak of their God's will and prepare the dying for the next world. You fight death like a warrior fights an enemy." "Death is an enemy," Cordelia replied, checking the pulse of an elderly man whose fever had finally broken. "But sometimes the wisest warriors know when to retreat so they can fight another day." By sunrise, 3 patients had died, but 7 who had seemed beyond hope showed signs of improvement. It was a small victory, but in a community where smallpox usually claimed 3 out of every 4 victims, it represented something approaching a miracle. Kiowa appeared in the doorway as Cordelia finally sat back on her heels, exhaustion washing over her like a tide. "You have kept your first bargain, Talichi," he said, using her new Apache name. "My people will remember what you have done here." "This is only the beginning," Cordelia replied, meeting his gaze. "If I'm to stay among you, there's much more. I need to teach them about preventing disease, about sanitation, about caring for the sick without spreading illness to the healthy." Something shifted in the warrior's expression, a recognition that this white woman understood the deeper implications of her situation. "Yes," he said quietly, "and there is much we need to teach you about surviving in a world where your old life no longer exists." Winter deepened in the hidden canyon, and with it, Cordelia's integration into Apache life grew more complex. The smallpox outbreak had been contained through her medical knowledge combined with Nalish's traditional healing wisdom, but success brought unexpected challenges. Young Apache warriors began seeking her out, not for medical treatment but for her attention. Her fair skin and red gold hair had become objects of fascination, and her courage in fighting the epidemic had elevated her status beyond that of a mere captive. They brought her gift-carved bone ornaments, beautifully worked leather, even horses courting gestures that put Kiowa in an increasingly difficult position. "She is under your protection," Nalnish observed one evening as they watched Cordelia diplomatically decline another suitor's advances. The old medicine woman's eyes sparkled with amusement. "But protection from what? From them or from you?" Kiowa didn't answer, but his jaw tightened as he watched a young warrior named Delshe present Cordelia with a necklace of turquoise and silver, clearly taken in a recent raid on Mexican settlements. The white woman accepted it graciously, but immediately passed it to a young Apache girl whose parents had died in the epidemic, a gesture that earned approving murmurs from the watching women. "She learns our ways quickly," the medicine woman continued. "Perhaps too quickly for your comfort." That night, Kiowa approached Cordelia as she sat outside her assigned wickiup, studying the star-filled sky. The desert cold bit through her borrowed Apache clothing, soft deerskin dress, and leggings that marked her changing status within the community. "You cannot continue encouraging their attentions," he said without preamble, settling beside her on the woven mat. "I'm not encouraging anything," Cordelia replied calmly. "I'm being polite to men who have shown me kindness. Among my people, that's considered proper behavior. Among my people, it's considered an invitation." His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard since their first meeting. "Unless you intend to choose one of them as your husband." The word hung between them in the cold air like a challenge. Cordelia turned to study his profile, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand rested on his knife hilt, unconscious gestures that spoke of a man struggling with unexpected emotions. "Is that what this is about?" she asked softly. "Marriage?" "You made me a bargain," Kiowa said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Strong children, you said. But children need fathers, and Apache women choose their own husbands from among worthy men. And you're afraid I might choose someone else." He turned to face her fully, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression, a crack in the warrior's armor that revealed the man beneath. "I am afraid of many things where you are concerned, Telichi. Most of all, I fear that you will choose to return to your people when spring comes and the soldiers venture into our territory again." The honesty in his admission stunned her. "Would you let me go if I asked?" "Yes," he said immediately, then paused. "But I hope you will not ask." Cordelia reached out, her pale hand covering his dark one where it rested on his knee. "I can't go back to my old life, Kiowa. That woman died beside the burning wagon 3 months ago. The question is whether the woman who has taken her place can build something meaningful here." "And what would be meaningful to you?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. "Among my people, marriage is often a business arrangement, property and bloodlines, social advancement, economic security. I never wanted that kind of union." She squeezed his hand gently. "But here, with you, I see the possibility of something different. Partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose." Kiowa lifted their joined hands, studying the contrast between their skin tones in the starlight. In Apache tradition, a man proves his worth to a woman's family through great deeds. But you have no family here to convince. Then convince me, Cordelia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering with words, he leaned forward and kissed her gently at first, then with growing passion as she responded. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard, the desert cold forgotten in the heat of their discovery. I claim you, he said in Apache, then repeated it in English. Before the spirits and the stars, I claim Talichi as my woman. And I accept, she replied, sealing their bond in the ancient way of two hearts choosing each other against all odds and expectations. From the shadows of nearby wickiups, approving murmurs arose. The Apache community had been waiting for this moment, understanding its significance not just for the couple, but for the delicate balance of their isolated world. Spring brought more than wildflowers to the hidden canyon, it brought soldiers. The thunder of cavalry horses echoed off the sandstone walls at dawn, and Cordelia woke in Kiowa's arms to the sound of her old world colliding with her new one. Company of the 5th Cavalry. The shouted words carried clearly through the crisp morning air. We know you're holding a white woman captive. Release her unharmed and we'll withdraw peacefully. Kiowa was already moving, reaching for his weapons while signaling Cordelia to stay low. Around them, the camp transformed from sleepy tranquility to organized chaos as warriors took defensive positions and women gathered children into the most protected wickiups. They've come for me, Cordelia whispered, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and unexpected grief. After 5 months among the Apache, the thought of returning to white society felt like contemplating her own death. Will you go with them? Kiowa asked, his voice carefully neutral despite the tension radiating from his body. Before she could answer, Nalnish appeared in their wickiup's entrance. Talichi, she said urgently, they must see you alive and unharmed, or they will attack. Our warriors are brave, but cavalry rifles will kill many of our people. Cordelia nodded, understanding the impossible position she had been placed in. She was no longer just a woman choosing between two worlds, she was a bridge that might prevent a massacre, or the spark that ignited one. Cordelia nodded, understanding the impossible position she had been placed in. She was no longer just a woman choosing between two worlds, she was a bridge that might prevent a massacre, or the spark that ignited one. I'll speak with them, she decided, rising and smoothing her Apache dress. The soft deerskin felt natural against her skin now, more comfortable than any corset and bustle she had ever worn. Not alone, Kiowa said firmly. You are my woman. I will not let you face them without protection. Together, they walked through the camp toward the canyon entrance where Captain Morrison waited with 30 mounted soldiers. Cordelia recognized him from her father's trading expeditions, a decent man, she remembered, but one shaped by military duty and frontier prejudices. Miss Brightwater. The captain's relief was visible as she came into view. Thank God you're alive. Your father's business partner reported the wagon attack months ago. We've been searching ever since. I am well, Captain Morrison, Cordelia replied, keenly aware of the rifles trained on Kiowa and the Apache warriors flanking them. As you can see, I have been treated with respect and kindness. The captain's eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance, the Apache clothing, the turquoise jewelry, the confident way she stood beside the warrior leader. You've been held captive for 5 months, miss. Stockholm Syndrome is not uncommon in such circumstances. You're safe now. I have not been held captive, Cordelia said clearly, her voice carrying to both the soldiers and the Apache community behind her. I have been living among people who saved my life and welcomed me as family. Captain Morrison's face darkened. Miss Brightwater, These savages are responsible for raids across the territory. Ranches burned, families murdered, children taken. You cannot seriously suggest you've chosen to live among them willingly. I suggest nothing, Captain. I state it plainly. Cordelia stepped closer to Kiowa, making her alliance unmistakable. I am married to this man by Apache law. I carry his child. The lie came smoothly to her lips, born of desperate strategy. I am no longer the woman you seek to rescue. A shocked murmur ran through both groups. Kiowa's eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing, understanding the game she was playing. That's impossible, the captain sputtered. You're a Christian. Woman of good breeding. I was, Cordelia interrupted. But that woman died in the desert beside a burning wagon. The woman who stands before you now is Telechi, wife of the Apache war leader Kiowa, and she chooses to remain with her husband and his people. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Behind the soldiers, Cordelia could see the rigid disapproval on every uniformed face. Behind her, she felt the warmth of Apache support, the community that had accepted her transformation from captive to healer to beloved wife. Captain, Morrison made one final attempt. Miss Brightwater, Mrs. Whatever you call yourself now, I'm ordering you to come with us. These people are enemies of the United States government. Associating with them makes you a traitor. Then I am a traitor, Cordelia replied without hesitation. I choose love over law, healing over hatred, and a future built on understanding rather than endless war. Kiowa stepped forward, his hand resting protectively on Cordelia's shoulder. Tell your soldiers that Telechi speaks truth, he said. In careful English. She is Apache now, mother of our children, keeper of our healing ways. Any who threaten her threaten all of us. The implied threat was clear, and Captain Morrison was experienced enough to recognize it. His small force could massacre the camp, but at terrible cost to his own men. More importantly, killing a white woman who had publicly declared her allegiance to the Apache would create political complications he was not prepared to handle. This isn't over, he said finally, turning his horse away. The territorial governor will want a full report. As the cavalry disappeared into the desert heat, Cordelia felt Kiowa's arm encircle her waist. You told him you carry my child, he said quietly. I lied, she admitted, but perhaps it's time to make that lie into truth. By midsummer, Cordelia's fabricated pregnancy had become reality. The child growing within her seemed to embody the fusion of two worlds, and she felt the baby's first movements while teaching young Apache women the fundamentals of sterile technique and disease prevention. The hidden canyon had become something unprecedented in the violent history of the American frontier, a place where Apache traditions merged with white medical knowledge to create something entirely new. Under Cordelia's guidance, the community had survived not only the smallpox outbreak, but also a severe outbreak of dysentery that killed dozens in neighboring Apache bands. You have changed us, Nalnish observed one evening as they prepared medicines from local plants. The old woman's hands moved with practiced skill, grinding dried roots while Cordelia measured precise dosages. Not just with your white medicine, but with your questions. You make us think about why our remedies work, not just that they work. And you've changed me, Cordelia replied, feeling the baby kick as she spoke. I used to think healing was about fighting disease with medicine. Now I understand it's about restoring balance between sick and well, between traditional wisdom and new knowledge, between opposing forces that need each other to create something stronger. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching the canyon entrance. Kiowa appeared in the doorway of their wickiup, his face grim with concern. Riders coming, he announced, but not soldiers this time. Apache from Chief Geronimo's band, and they carry war paint. Cordelia felt a chill of apprehension. Geronimo's reputation had spread across the territory, a war leader who refused all compromise with white expansion, who viewed any Apache cooperation with outsiders as betrayal of their people's sacred duty. Within hours, the canyon buzzed with tension as Geronimo himself entered their hidden sanctuary. He was smaller than Cordelia had expected, but radiated an intensity that made hardened warriors step aside. His eyes found her immediately, taking in her pregnant condition and Apache dress with obvious disdain. "So," he said in English, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "this is the White Witch who has bewitched our warriors into forgetting their duty to drive all invaders from Apache lands." "I am Talichi," Cordelia replied, rising with dignity despite her awkwardness. "Wife of Kiowa, healer to his people, and mother of the child I carry." "You are an enemy," Geronimo stated flatly. "Your presence here endangers every Apache band in the territory. The soldiers who came seeking you will return with more men, more guns. Your husband's people will die because he chose to harbor a white woman." Kiowa stepped forward, his hand on his knife hilt. "Talichi has saved more Apache lives than your raids have avenged. She is one of us now. She is white." Geronimo's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "Her skin will never change. Her blood will never become Apache blood. The child she carries will be half white, forever caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither." The words struck Cordelia like physical blows, not because they were entirely false, but because they contained enough truth to wound. She had indeed brought danger to the people she loved, and her child would face challenges that pure-blooded Apache children would never encounter. "You speak of blood and skin," she said quietly, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "But what of spirit? What of choice? What of love that transcends the accidents of birth?" Geronimo studied her with eyes that had seen too much death, too much betrayal. "Love," he repeated mockingly. "White love brought smallpox blankets and broken treaties. White love brings soldiers who shoot Apache children for sport." "Not all love," Cordelia insisted. "Not this love. I have lived among your people for 8 months. I have shared their struggles, learned their wisdom, contributed what I could to their survival. If that doesn't earn me the right to call myself Apache, then what does?" "Suffering," Geronimo replied immediately. "When you have buried your children killed by white soldiers, when you have seen your homeland carved into cattle ranches, when you have been hunted like an animal simply for existing, then perhaps you will understand what it means to be Apache." The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Around them, the entire community waited to see how their white medicine woman would respond to this fundamental rejection of her chosen identity. Cordelia was quiet for a long moment, feeling her baby move restlessly within her womb as if sensing the tension. When she spoke again, her voice carried a new quality, not the desperate pleading of a captive or the careful diplomacy of an outsider, but the calm certainty of someone who had found her true place in the world. "I cannot change the color of my skin or the circumstances of my birth," she said, "but I can change the future. This child I carry will grow up speaking both Apache and English, understanding both worlds, able to bridge them in ways neither you nor I can imagine. Perhaps that is my true purpose here, not to become Apache, but to help create something new that honors both traditions." For the first time since his arrival, Geronimo looked uncertain. The possibility she presented challenged his fundamental worldview, forcing him to consider whether absolute resistance might not be the only path forward. The confrontation with Geronimo marked a turning point in the canyon community's relationship with the broader Apache resistance. While the war leader ultimately departed without forcing a crisis, his words planted seeds of doubt that would require careful tending in the months ahead. Cordelia's son was born during the autumn harvest moon, arriving with the powerful lungs and fierce grip that Apache tradition interpreted as signs of a natural warrior. Kiowa held his son for the first time with trembling hands, seeing in the child's mixed features the living symbol of two worlds learning to coexist. "He will need a strong name," Nalnish declared, examining the infant with the practiced eye of a woman who had delivered dozens of Apache babies. "I see the eagle spirit in his eyes, but also the healing touch of his mother. He will be Atsastian first man of a new beginning." The name ceremony drew Apache visitors from across the territory, including several who had initially opposed Cordelia's presence among them. The child's obvious health and strength, combined with his mother's continued contributions to Apache survival, gradually shifted opinion in their favor. "Look how the children flock to her," observed a visiting war leader as he watched Cordelia teaching a group of young Apache girls to identify medicinal plants. "She passes knowledge to the next generation, not just healing bodies but strengthening minds." Indeed, Cordelia had become much more than a medicine woman. Her ability to read and write had proved invaluable in dealing with Indian agents and territorial officials. Her knowledge of white customs and legal procedures helped Apache leaders navigate increasingly complex negotiations over land rights and treaty obligations. More importantly, she had begun training selected Apache men and women in advanced medical techniques, creating a network of healers who could serve bands across the region. The knowledge she shared was practical rather than theoretical: how to perform emergency surgery with improvised instruments, how to identify and treat various diseases, how to establish proper sanitation in temporary camps. "You are building something that will outlive us both," Kiowa told her one evening as they watched their son sleep peacefully in his cradleboard. "Not just the healing knowledge, but the proof that two peoples can learn from each other without one destroying the other." Their peaceful life was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Morrison and a small diplomatic party in the spring of Atsastian's first year. This time, however, the soldiers came not to rescue or arrest, but to negotiate. "The territorial governor has authorized me to offer a proposal," Captain Morrison explained during a tense meeting in the canyon's council circle. Mrs. Talichi has clearly demonstrated valuable skills in preventing disease outbreaks among the Apache population. The government is prepared to offer her an official position as a medical liaison between Apache bands and territorial health authorities. Cordelia and Kiowa exchanged glances, recognizing both the opportunity and the trap inherent in the offer. Official status would provide protection from harassment and legal persecution, but it would also make her answerable to government authorities who might not always have Apache interests at heart. "What would be expected of me in this position?" Cordelia asked carefully. "You would establish medical stations at various Apache settlements, train native healers in disease prevention, and report on health conditions to territorial authorities," Morrison replied. "In exchange, the government would provide medical supplies, vaccinations, and formal recognition of your unique circumstances." The proposal sparked intense debate within the Apache community. Some saw it as a path toward peaceful coexistence with white authorities, while others viewed it as a subtle form of control that would ultimately weaken Apache independence. Geronimo's voice was notably absent from these discussions. The war leader had departed the territory months earlier, choosing the path of armed resistance over accommodation. His departure had removed a major source of opposition to Cordelia's presence, but also eliminated a powerful advocate for complete Apache sovereignty. "I will accept the position," Cordelia announced after a week of deliberation, "but only if certain conditions are met. First, I report to tribal leaders before I report to territorial authorities. Second, all medical supplies and services are distributed according to Apache needs, not government priorities. Third, any Apache healer I train remains answerable to their own people, not to white officials. Captain Morrison's jaw tightened at the conditions, but political realities forced his acceptance. Disease outbreaks among Apache bands had become a significant problem for territorial authorities, often spilling over into white settlements. Cordelia's success in controlling such outbreaks made her too valuable to alienate over bureaucratic protocols. The formal agreement was signed during Zima, the summer solstice, witnessed by Apache leaders from 6 different bands. Cordelia signed with her legal name Cordelia Brightwater, but added her Apache identity beneath it, Talichi, wife of Kiowa, mother of Atsahastian, healer of the people. As the ceremony concluded and the various parties dispersed to spread word of the agreement, Kiowa found his wife standing alone at the canyon's rim, watching the sun set over the vast desert landscape that had become their shared home. "Do you ever regret your choice?" he asked, settling beside her with their son cradled in his arms. Cordelia considered the question seriously, thinking of the woman she had been beside that burning wagon nearly 2 years ago. That woman had been shaped by fear, desperation, and the narrow assumptions of her upbringing. The woman she had become had been forged by love, challenge, and the daily choice to build bridges rather than walls. "No," she said finally, leaning against her husband's shoulder as their son reached tiny hands toward the stars appearing in the darkening sky. That woman who begged for her life beside a burning wagon, she was already dying of a life too small for her spirit. The woman I became when I chose love over fear, healing over hatred, she is finally truly alive. The desert wind carried the sound of Apache drums from the canyon below, marking the end of another day in a life that had been reborn from the ashes of the old world. In the growing darkness, 3 hearts beat in harmony: Apache warrior, white medicine woman, and the child who embodied hope for a future where such distinctions might matter less than the courage to choose love over fear. Their story had begun with a desperate bargain for survival. It would continue as a testament to the power of 2 people to create something beautiful and lasting from the wreckage of a world determined to keep them apart.